Hello, Beth. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I must say that this definitely qualifies as above and beyond in service to the call of duty. Beth is here from her risen from her sickbed.
Yes.
Due to the wonders of Zoom technology, you are not going to miss out on her remarks today. And we are very, very fortunate indeed to have her here as our second plenary of the day. I'm just going to say a few words of introduction and then turn this over to the expert. Beth Wynstra is Associate Professor of English at Babson College. She holds a PhD in Theater Studies from the University of California, Santa Barbara, and a certificate in directing from the Yale School of Drama. Beth is the Faculty Director of the Center for Engaged Learning and Teaching at Babson. Beth's new book, VOWS, Veils and Masks, The Performance of Marriage in the Plays of Eugene O'Neill, just published by University of Iowa Press, Theater History and Culture series, earlier this summer. She has written extensively on the life and plays of Eugene O'Neill and serves on the board of the Eugene O'Neill International Society. She has also served as dramaturg for several productions of O'Neill's plays, and she has lectured on O'Neill at prominent regional and professional theaters, including the Huntington Theater and Lyric Stage. She regularly directs plays and musicals at Babson and is the founding artistic director of the Empty Space Theater. In 2023, Beth was awarded the Scholarship Award at Babson College. Turn it over now, Beth Wynstra.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It is an understatement to say that I am so sad not to be there to celebrate Harley and his incredible collection and to see so many of my dear O'Neillian friends. But I was thinking I'm going to take the advice of the priest character in O'Neill's The Sniper when he says, "You must not brood over your misfortunes." So with that, I will say a big thank you to everyone who put together this incredible event, most especially Dirk Killen and Joel Miner. It's been an honor to be a part of this event, and I'm thrilled to be able to celebrate Harley and the gift of his extraordinary collection to Washington University of St. Louis. As I wrote about in the beautiful catalog that accompanies this event, in 2010, the first year of my college teaching career, I assigned Eugene O'Neill's The Hairy Ape to students in my American Dream on Page and Stage course. The day that we were to discuss the play, many of my students did not have the designated text from the college bookstore. Rather, these students arrived with a printed out version of the play, a version with a distinctive crimson colored band across the top that included a photo of O'Neill. These students had found the play free of charge on Harley Hammerman's eo'neill.com website. Yeah. Some students were excited that they had also found a production of The Hairy Ape on Harley's site, while others informed me that they had listened to a radio version of the play. I remember two students in particular who were elated to find lyrics to Beer, Glorious Beer, a song used in The Hairy Ape on eo'neill.com. They then happily shared that song with their fraternity brothers. eo'neill.com became a portal for all kinds of exciting discoveries as students experienced the magic of an archive. They encountered unexpected treasures and surprising artifacts that enhanced their study of O'Neill. These discoveries were not the result of a formal archival assignment. Rather, Harley's site invited exploration and ensured inspiration. While Harley's collection of O'Neill manuscripts, correspondence, production artifacts, photographs, and critical essays have long been a gift to scholars and historians. I witnessed the power of the collection on young students. I am delighted that Washington University in St. Louis is now the home for the Hammerman collection. At a moment when the educational landscape is changing rapidly, when artificial intelligence and content generating tools impede on critical thinking and original research, archives are vitally important. Collections like Harley's serve to strengthen collective memory and are significant sites for historic and cultural context and understanding. Perhaps most importantly, archives like the Hammerman collection offer an opportunity for this and future generations of students to make connections between past and present, to challenge long-held ideas, and to find that one special artifact that will spark curiosity and delight. I am fortunate that the research process for my recent book was marked by many archival artifacts that sparked curiosity and delight. My book focuses on the engagements, weddings, and marriages so crucial to the tragic action in Eugene O'Neill's plays. Specifically, Vows, Veils, and Masks examines the culturally sanctioned traditions and gender roles that underscored marital life in the early 20th century and that still haunt and define love and partnership in the modern age. For the last 100 years, interpreters of O'Neill's work, by and large, have gravitated toward a consistent narrative about the married women in his plays. They are malicious characters who initiate tragic events and are to blame for, as one scholar notes, quote, causing the disillusionment, downfall, or even death of the men who tangle with them, end quote. These wife characters have been described by scholars as undependable, dangerous creatures, a hindrance to man's self-expression, predatory villains, not only lustful, but dishonest, cannibals, bitches. In my study, I analyze and weave in artifacts like advice columns, advertisements, theatrical reviews, and even the lived experiences of the actors who brought O'Neill's wife characters to life. I seek to offer new ways of seeing and empathizing with those who are betrothed, and new possibilities for reading marriage in literary and dramatic works. One of the great joys of my research process was spending a lot of time in the Women's Magazine archive, a comprehensive digital collection of prominent and high-circulating publications geared to women, such as Cosmopolitan, Redbook, Vogue, Town and Country, and Good Housekeeping. The Women's Magazine archive and its contents serve as canonical records of evolving assumptions about gender roles and societal mores. Pre-pandemic, I would travel from my institution, Babson College, down the street to Wellesley College to dig into this archive, and an experience that would come to a big halt during the pandemic. I want to offer my profound thanks here to librarian Daryl Bullis and Horn Library at Babson College for ensuring that my research could continue with the purchase of this archive for the Babson College community. Since Babson has acquired this archive, a colleague and I have developed a now formal assignment for every first-year student at Babson, where they dig into the Women's Magazine archive, look for advertisements, and create presentations as a result. For today, I'm going to give you a taste of how I use this archive in my research and in my book. In the January 1922 edition of Vogue magazine, Kenneth McGowan, a prominent theater critic, penned a glowing review for a new play by O'Neill called Anna Christie. The appearance of O'Neill's name in magazines and newspapers during his career is not surprising.
Beth, can I break in for a second?
Oh, yeah.
Are you hoping to forward your slides? Can you forward your slides?
Yeah, is it not forwarding?
It's not. We're still on the first slide.
Oh, no.
Share as a
You, yeah, you may have to share as a slideshow.
Let's see.
Yeah, I'll probably see that too.
Is this working?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Did you get any of my slides before that?
No.
Okay, well, these are my ones about Harley. So thank you, Harley. Yeah. And sorry, I can't believe you didn't see any of these. Yes, okay. So this is all the words there. Doing a little review here. Here's the Women's Magazine archive. Okay. So I think we're okay now.
Good.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Dirk. Okay. In the January 1922 edition of Vogue magazine, Kenneth McGowan, a prominent theater critic, penned a glowing review for a new play by O'Neill called Anna Christie. The appearance of O'Neill's name in magazines and newspapers during his career is not surprising. The press covered and the public closely followed the life and works of the most prominent and prolific dramatist of the first half of the 20th century. In his review, McGowan argues, "The man and girl will marry in the morning before the ship sails. This, by the grace of the marriage sacrament, is a happy ending. So say those who find here the only flaw in an otherwise extraordinary play. As a matter of fact, it is nothing but life's assertion that it will get itself lived, no matter the price. But bitter or sweet, life commands life, life goes on." McGowan's review echoes O'Neill's own sentiments that the promise of a marriage at the conclusion of Anna Christie does not guarantee a happily ever after ending for the central characters, Anna and Matt. McGowan and O'Neill assert that marriage is not the ultimate prize to be won, but rather a single moment in an ever-continuing life for the couple. Yet on the page directly before McGowan's review in Vogue magazine, this advertisement for Palmolive soap appears. It is one of only 4 colored advertisements in the issue and features a large, beautiful illustration of a bride wearing a full-length veil cascading down her back and holding an enormous bouquet of flowers. With bobbed hair and a long pearl necklace draped around her neck, the bride is keeping with modern fashion trends of the day. In bolded lettering, the advertisement reads, "Keep that wedding day complexion." It will go on to remind readers that, quote, "Bridal beauty should not fade, nor the passing of each anniversary be recorded on your face." In multiple paragraphs, the advertisement elevates the wedding day as the pinnacle moment for a woman's beauty and the moment to which wives should always be trying to return. The entirety of the Palmolive advertisement hinges on the idea that a wedding is not only intimately connected to outer appearances and physical beauty, but is indeed the ultimate goal, particularly for young women. McGowan and O'Neill would indeed have an uphill battle convincing large swatches of their audience otherwise. Just a few years later, in the May 15th, 1924 edition of Vogue, another McGowan review appeared, this time not as glowing, for a new play by O'Neill called Welded. The play focuses on a couple learning to reconcile the lofty romanticism of their courtship to the realities of their marriage and to move toward honest interactions and away from artificial role-playing. McGowan touches on these ideas by arguing in his review that, quote, the play as well as its people must stand naked, end quote. Yet this review would be placed alongside and in the same Vogue issue as this advertisement for Odorno underarm toilette. The advertisement begins by warning its readers, marriage is the stage setting, not the ending of the play. Such intertwining of marriage with performance shows up in much marital advice literature and advertisements in the first part of the 20th century. A wedding, perhaps in the minds of potential brides and grooms, was the ceremonial ending to courtship deception or the masking of true natures, and rather the welcoming in of real intimacy and honesty between spouses. Yet expectations bolstered by 20th century popular media reveal that the illusion making and prescribed behavior in courtship was to begin anew with an I do. Such designated behavior and assigned realms, as well as the work required to keep marriages functioning and adhering to societal norms, would largely be a wife's responsibility, all of which is also touched on in this Odorno ad. It continues by questioning why, quote, with a marriage, a woman feels she's reached her port of destiny and no longer needs to row. Danger ahead. Lastly, the ad contends that, quote, a woman's personal daintiness is one of her strongest appeals to a man, end quote. Now, before I go any further, I am not denying that smelling fresh for one's partner is a kind and significant gesture. But I do want to point out that the advertisement and its tactics of intertwining performance with marriage, putting the impetus of marital work on wives, and emphasizing outer attributes like daintiness are actually the very expectations that were continuously pushed on early 20th century women via magazine columns, advice literature, popular fiction, and advertisements. A recognition of these repeatedly espoused expectations for women, I believe, is an important context to think through the marital dynamics and wife characters in O'Neill's plays, many of which would be reviewed or advertised right next to the media doing this encouraging of gender-specific behavior and roles. Sometimes the very women who brought O'Neill's complex wife characters to life would be the subject of or themselves pen articles and stories about their own approaches to matrimony. And sometimes the appearance these actors made in popular media or their own marital experiences mirrored in extraordinary and odd ways what their dramatic counterparts attempted in O'Neill's groundbreaking portrayals of marriage. There is Mary Pine of the Provincetown Players, whose own marriage and even the very layout of her apartment resembled those of the Rowland couple in Before Breakfast, the play by O'Neill in which Pine starred as Mrs. Rowland. There was Leona Hogarth, who, after starring as Margaret in O'Neill's famous mask play, The Great God Brown, found herself in the center of a lawsuit brought on by her husband. The lawsuit contended that another woman had alienated and acquired an improper influence over Hogarth, all because Hogarth's husband had simply gone away on a fishing trip. In other words, Hogarth's good wife mask would have stayed firmly in place if her husband was there to monitor her actions. And finally, Claudette Colbert, who, after starring as Ada in O'Neill's Dynamo, tried unconventional approaches to partnership like her dramatic counterpart. Colbert and husband Norman Foster lived in separate homes during their entire marriage, claiming that their arrangement was modern and a deliberate way for them to concentrate on their careers and keep the romance alive. The fact of the matter was that Colbert's mother, Jean, would not allow Norman to become a part of the family. Thus, like Ada Fife in O'Neill's Dynamo, Colbert suffered from strict parental expectations about marriage and had to maintain a public stance that was quite different from the reality of her matrimonial situation. To return to Welded, it is interesting to note that that play is about a couple 5 years into a marriage, written by O'Neill, who is 5 years into his marriage, and starring Doris Keane, who is 5 years into her marriage. Keane's marriage, like that of O'Neill's to Agnes Bolton, would soon dissolve. When her divorce finalized in 1925, Keane said in an interview that she and her husband, quote, parted the best of friends, but romance and marriage are two different things. And anytime I speak of the former, it must not be confused with the latter. Keane's statement speaks to heightened expectations for romance and intrigue to continue into a marriage, and just how difficult this continuation can be, a situation certainly present in Welded, the play in which Keane starred. In Homecoming, part 1 of O'Neill's play, Morning Becomes Electra, the character Christine Mannon expresses what will be a consistent worry and refrain throughout the play, the loss of her youth and beauty. As she laments to her younger lover, Adam Brandt, quote, but I'll grow old so soon, and I'm afraid of time, end quote. She will later tell another character, quote, I can't let myself get ugly. I can't, end quote. The stage directions of Morning Becomes Electra describe Christine as, quote, 40, but looks much younger. And this notion of Christine looking more youthful than her age comes up repeatedly in the play. Alla Nazimova, who starred as Christine in the premiere of Morning Becomes Electra, was featured in a series of advertisements in prominent women's magazines that ran concurrently with the production. These advertisements for Lux soap seem to respond in a remarkable way to Nazimova's on-stage counterparts' anxieties about aging. In the April 1932 issue of Good Housekeeping, this advertisement for Lux declares in bold lettering, quote, I'm proud of my age, says Nazimova. I'm over 40. The advertisement goes on to continue quoting the actor. Only the woman who looks it is afraid to admit her age, says Nazimova, fascinating star of the Broadway success Morning Becomes Electra. But I'm proud of mine. Look at me, I'm over 40. While Nazimova, unlike Christine Mannon, seems to celebrate her over 40 status, the advertisement in actuality persuades by using anxieties around aging likely felt by readers. And in reality, Nazimova herself was elusive about her age all her life. In a 1924 article called Why I Didn't Divorce My Husband, that actor Louise Closser Hale penned for Cosmopolitan, she argues against any kind of facade in marriages. Closser Hale originated the role of Mrs. Atkins in the Broadway premiere of O'Neill's Beyond the Horizon just 4 years earlier. She argues, while sounding a bit like the character Mrs. Atkins herself, I had heard a good bit about keeping up the illusion. I don't know why we should keep it up or for whom. Of all the false advice given a bride, I think this illusion business is the worst. Brides go down the aisle with their face veiled and go back with it uncovered. They can look at the world. They want to. That's why they married. They have passed beyond the illusion. The fact that Closser Hale calls out the illusion business aspect of advice given to brides demonstrates the widespread nature of this type of guidance and how the idyllic and false aura around marriages fell heavily to wives to uphold. Closser Hale's sound marital insight, of course, forms a sharp contrast to the pressures felt acutely by her fellow actors. It would also form a sharp contrast to widespread and commonly held expectations about marriage, where partners who know each other was far less touted than those who do the necessary performing or illusion making to win and keep a mate. I will return once again to the play Anna Christie and circumstances involving its star, Pauline Lord. Lord earned rave reviews for her compelling and nuanced portrayal of the prostitute character Anna during the Broadway premiere. While critics could understand, thanks to Lord's performance, the character of Anna as more than just her sexual past, such understandings were not extended to Lord herself in the writing about her offstage life. Indeed, in February 1922, just 3 months after the premiere of Anna Christie, several articles surfaced about a lawsuit involving Lord. The wife of actor Mitchell Harris sued Lord for $50,000 for the alienation of her husband's affections. An article in the Minneapolis Sunday Tribune describes the elements of the lawsuit. In 1918, Miss Lord made herself so attractive to the fascinating Mitchell that he was drawn from his proper allegiance, that he later saw the error of his way and tried to return to his duty, but the siren lure was so effective and determined that he was helpless. With language that clearly supports notions of the double standard, the article pins responsibility on Lord for the accused adultery. It was her attractiveness that was just so effective in luring Mitchell away from his marriage. When the Tribune article later describes Lord's denial of any kind of sexual involvement with Mitchell, she is not quoted directly, but again objectified. The article states that Lord has come forward to, quote, protest that anyone with a speck of perception could see at once that she was merely misfortune's football and no more a vampire than Puritan Priscilla, end quote. These limited delineations of vampire and Puritan Priscilla reveal the precarious position women found themselves, where, excuse me, where beauty and outer appearances were to guarantee a marriage, but could also threaten another one. The very women who brought O'Neill's wife characters to life were participants in the great cultural conversations around marriage, partnership, spousal roles, and gendered expectations happening at the first part of the 20th century. These women's marital hardships and the subsequent societal scrutiny they faced often required a dynamic performance where insecurities, true hopes, and authentic feelings had to be submerged or masked. The presence and resonance of real women's lived experiences within the pages of O'Neill's works opens up new possibilities for seeing and thinking about the often maligned and minimized wife character. In this presentation, I have charted stories of actors whose experiences with marriage intersected with and resembled those of their dramatic counterparts. In 2013, another prominent actor wrote an essay in the New York Times exploring the public backlash in response to her performance as a wife in a television series. In I Have a Character Issue, actor Anna Gunn explains that her character, Skylar White, in the acclaimed Breaking Bad, had become, quote, a flashpoint for many people's feelings about strong, non-submissive, ill-treated women, end quote. Gunn notes that in online forums and discussion boards, Skylar, who on the show tries to stop her husband's illicit drug-making criminal enterprise to protect her family, was being called out as a ball and chain, a drag, a shrew, and an annoying bitch wife. Such descriptions, of course, are almost identical to how scholars named O'Neill's wife characters almost a century before. As with earlier assessments of the characters, easy labeling halts further attempts to understand them. After pointing out that other complex TV wives, such as Carmela Soprano from The Sopranos or Betty Draper from Mad Men, received criticisms similar to reactions to Skylar White, Gunn surmises that most people's hatred of Skylar had little to do with me and a lot to do with their own perception of women and wives. Because Skylar didn't conform to a comfortable ideal of the archetypical female, she had become a kind of Rorschach test for society, a measure of our attitudes toward gender. Gunn's commentary points out how conditioned and stereotypical thinking can cloud how one perceives the actions a wife might need to take or the unorthodox behavior she might exhibit. As much as ideas about marriage and the roles of women in romantic relationships have evolved, Gunn points out that women moving out of a comfortable ideal of the archetypical female are still unnerving for many. Almost a century before Breaking Bad, the wives in O'Neill's plays were demonstrating how they conform to set societal standards and how they ultimately break from such standards. The plays, read alongside contemporaneous marital literature, offer a chance to interrogate commonly held models for the good wife and to better understand that standing by one's man is not at all a stationary exercise, but one that has and still does require an active and often self-destructive performance on the part of wives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Beth. We now have time for questions. Are you
Great.
ready with some questions?
Yes, yeah, that sounds good. I can't see the room. I don't know. I just see your picture, Dirk. I'm not sure.
Oh, that's good. Right there.
No.
I will point out folks and they can say their name before they speak. And Harley.
Hi, Beth.
Hi, Harley.
I was so looking forward to meeting you after
I
all.
know, likewise.
I have to find another time to come.
Yes.
That was wonderful, and I'm gonna thank you tonight during my talk, but you're not gonna be here tonight, so I wanted to thank you for what you wrote in the catalog. I told Katie, the two of you really nailed me in terms of the collection and in terms of the website. I can't tell you how many. I mean, I built that website over almost 20 years and spent hours and hours and hours alone in my study. Like, is anybody looking at this stuff? Or is anybody using
Yes,
this?
we were.
And you know, it's gratifying to know that, yeah, that people were using it. The other thing interesting, on the website, there's a section called the short stories of Agnes Bolton, which
Yes.
somebody you know, Dave
Yes.
King credited and introduced. And it's been a long time since I've read those short stories, but I'm wondering whether somebody who had a not so perfect marriage to O'Neill, if there are any of the themes that you talked about in those short stories. And the other thing is that a lot of those magazines, I think a lot of them were something called Breezy Stories or Breezy something.
Yeah, easy breezy stories.
Yes, and
Yeah.
I'm wondering, you know, thinking back of any of the advertisements that you showed, some of those advertisements were also in there alongside of her short stories.
Yes. Thank you so much, Harley, for that question. And I also want to say too about your wonderful website. Besides it being so important for my students, it was really important for me as a graduate student. Your website was the first place that I ever published anything about O'Neill. It was actually an article about teaching O'Neill, and that is still a subject I'm very interested in. And so, the members of the Eugene O'Neill Society, and I know Katie is there, and she can speak to this. We're constantly trying to find ways to bring in younger scholars and younger voices, and your website was doing that long before we started working on this issue. So I want to thank you for that. And yes, Agnes Bolton's stories really, and I really do touch on a lot of the themes and ideas that I examine in my book. As we know, several of her stories became kind of the basis of O'Neill's plays, and her stories, unlike some of the others that it might have been being published at the same time, some of her stories really do take a careful look at a wife's work in marriage. And I don't think she does not shy away from some of the hardships of marriage. But with that said, where her stories and other authors would have had their works published in these women's magazines, very often you would have a story where it would be kind of a story with a moral or a lesson of make sure you know who you're marrying, take time to really assess your partner before saying I do. And so you'd have a story like that on one page, and then on the next page, you'd have an advertisement like the ones I showed, where it would be, a man's first impression of you is all that matters. So you better make sure you look good and smell good and things like that. So, the time that Agnes Bolton is writing is this very contradictory, difficult time for women in terms of messaging, because you could get stories that have some of these good ideas about waiting, maybe getting a job or exploring the world before settling down, and then advertisements which would undercut those messages kind of left and right.
Katie?
Beth, what a great talk.
Thank
It was
you.
amazing, and your book is so amazing. And I think what the talk foregrounded is your not just that is so incredibly well researched, but you're turning to alternate archives.
Mhm.
And maybe those sites that have been sort of denigrated because they're female, right? The female archive, which I think you do such a brilliant reading of the juxtaposition. And I wanted to ask you two quick questions. One is about the Anna Christie, and I love that bit about Pauline Lord. But I can also tell you, in my research on Anna Christie, I stumbled upon an article where they deliberately talked about Pauline Lord as being ugly. And it just struck me that, that just really underscores your argument and this double standard. She's either, this siren luring, right? Or she's so ugly that it was literally a whole article about it. And I don't know if that was put out in response to maybe that article. So I would love to continue that conversation with you.
I would love to hear that, Katie. I would love to that, but you are so right. I mean, that is just crazy. That is just crazy. I mean, but yet, I mean, and I see wonderful Sheila Higgy Garvey is there too, and who has had so many experiences interviewing actors and directing. But we still hear about this today. I mean, aren't there a lot of famous stories about Meryl Streep, right, who was denied roles because she was not attractive enough, or was, and then too attractive for this role. So it feels both of a distant time and also very of the moment as well. But yeah, Katie, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but yes, that is fascinating.
What was one discovery from the archive that didn't make the book?
this did not make the book, but I actually got to bring this up when I gave a talk at out in Danville. There was this amazing article about the invention of a stroller, a baby carriage, and how worrisome it was that now women could just roam far away from the home and not be close to the kitchen and house, and so that this baby carriage was going to be the crumbling of society as we know it, because they were now able to roam in the neighborhoods and far away from the house. So so that was pretty startling. And another treasure that did make into the book, but Edna Kenton, who was the kind of chronicler of the Provincetown Players, she was the one who really wrote the history and was the kind of secretary of the Provincetown Players. She wrote an incredible article in 1916 for, I think, Cosmopolitan magazine called "Anything New for Women is Wrong." And it was a piece about how if it's dance moves, if it's a new club, if it's whatever it is, that whatever women try will be deemed as wrong, hurtful, the ending of society. So it was really interesting that Edna Kenton, who's writing that, is also chronicling this theater company that is producing a lot of works that are showing women in new ways and are promoting women writers and women directors. So it's really fascinating. And to go back to your other point, Katie, the Women's Magazine Archive, I think, is an uncharted, undiscovered place for theater scholarship. The articles, the essays, I think it's going to be the focus of my next project, because there's still so much there left to explore, and it's really fascinating.
Beth, can you see the audience at all?
Yes, I can.
And I'll let you follow.
Yeah. Hi, Sheila.
Oh, hi, Beth. I haven't had anything to eat, so I'm feeling a little hypoglycemic here, but there's so much that you brought forth that my head is spinning around. First of all, I have to say how happy I've come to know you so well in the O'Neill Society, and your incredible mother, who is just like astonishing. And the fact that she raised two of you, there's twins. It's like, you're talking, Sheila. Oh my God, and it's, speaking of breaking, she's totally out of the mold in terms of your mother about what she's in charge of. Do you know what I mean? Just incredible. So no wonder you're incredible. But I think one of your great gifts that you're bringing to the O'Neill Society is humor, which we desperately need. We hardly, I'm not gonna hide that. But your tremendous sense of humor, and this is really the book, the way you've written is cultural anthropology, and you're bringing that in, and it's just so exciting to hear. I have one for you about Kathy Bates. She plays the daughter in Night Mother in the at least the original New York production. And the review said, you're familiar with this play, the daughter in this is telling the mother she has to commit suicide. She has an illness that's just going to be a terrible death for her. She has to commit suicide. The mother spends the whole play trying to talk her out of it. And in the reviews it said, no wonder she wants to commit suicide. She's so ugly. Yeah. How Kathy Bates could have gone on, face the rest of a career is, that takes tremendous courage to keep walking through all of that, So it hasn't stopped. I just brought this point I wanted to bring up, which is interesting. I've interviewed so many of the great O'Neill actresses. I would just say to you, said the O'Neill, the actors and the directors, and I've even playwrights, but the actresses, and these are greats like Colleen Dewhurst and Jane Alexander, and there's just, I've got one coming out in the spring review with Glenda Jackson that I did, which is, you would love it for your work, I think. Yes. And that there is, I think, they feel a difference in O'Neill the man, who was a terrible father and husband. And the way he writes the women, and that developed, every playwright that's wrote and has shown us continues to develop their work, and also their characters and the characterizations. But the women who played his roles really love those characters. And they get to say what a lot of women think. You know, going back to Anna Christie, but right up to Mary Tyrone, and if the morphine lets you say it, you know, then thank heavens for morphine. You know, it's just, it's a free, you know, they're free to say, and I'm sure he was hearing this all the time. And I think he and Agnes consider themselves trying a modern marriage. And, you know, whether he could achieve it or not as the husband, or she is the wife. Do you know what I mean? But all the blame going on her, of course, and not, you know, on him, or at least let's share the blame. You know, but the women tend to think that as a playwright himself, he was able to rise above and write legitimate women characters that are
Yes.
three-dimensional, you know, or at least the best types of their type.
I agree with that. And what's interesting, and I detail this in my book, is that actually in that same spirit, Sheila, is that reviewers of the plays and reviewers writing about the wife characters are actually see the whole picture, that they, you know, I write about like Beyond the Horizon, and reviewers will see that Ruth, the character of Ruth, is really not to blame for what happened, that this is circumstances beyond any of their controls. There's a lot of, you know, that, but then you look at the scholarship,
Yes.
it's Ruth is the worst thing that has ever happened to American theater, and she is the worst wife and a nagging shrew. And so it's really interesting that scholarship has even been far harsher to these women than even the reviewers reviewing the plays in the day. So that's what really fascinated me. And as I began my research, as I'm seeing all these terrible monikers and expressions for the wife characters, when I agree, Sheila, I think these characters are magnificent, and I have so much to say to us about the female condition and women and marriage and all of these things. So absolutely.
Henry in the back there.
Yes, go please.
I had a question, because I think that this is certainly an interesting approach, but I wondered to what extent it illuminates O'Neill's attitudes toward the women. You just mentioned Beyond the Horizon.
Mm-hmm.
To what extent do you think that O'Neill is creating a nuanced female character in a character like Ruth? Because, you know, otherwise the kind of criticism can seem simply self-congratulatory, in the sense that we've outgrown this, and we can look down on the sort of foibles of 1920s and 30s America, and we can even see in the example of Anna Gunn, we can see it sort of metastasizing more recently. But I'm wondering to what extent O'Neill conforms or doesn't conform to some of the hostility of the critics.
Yeah, great question. What I found is that, you know, with this kind of constant drumbeat for women to perform, that is a thread that I follow through a lot of marital advice literature at the first part of the 20th century, where it's expected that you don't reveal your full self, that you remain pretty, you only tell your partner the happy things of the day, and that kind of refrain appears in all kinds of text, advice columns. Even I looked at Margaret Sanger's marital advice book, Marriage Made Easy, and she even kind of falls prey to this. Like, in her book, she dedicates it to couples who really want to know each other. So that's how she starts her book. And then actually, as you get into it, she reminds her readers that women, it's very important for you to have glossy, shiny hair, and that you're going to find a partner who's worthy of you if you do not reveal too much about yourself. So everyone is there's so much advocating for this performing. So what I see in O'Neill's plays is almost lining up with that. We have so many couples. Beyond the Horizon is a great example, but so many plays in which we have couples who come together. They're not honest with one another during courtship or pre-engagement, and there's a lot of infatuation and over-the-top romance. And then O'Neill does this thing in his plays where like the action fast forwards 5 years and you find this very despondent couple, and they have, you know, and they kind of wonder what happened. But I see his plays tracking along similar lines to what was being advocated to women. So I think he's actually calling out how utterly disastrous this type of marital guidance can be. And then as I started researching and finding out how many women who were in these plays had very similar life experiences to the characters they played, it just felt like he really had his finger on the pulse of what was happening from a romantic partnership place in the early 20th century. I hope that answers your question.
It does. I think this, the question still remains, is he calling it out or is he conforming to it?
I think he's calling it out. I think
Yeah.
he is calling it
I
out.
wonder if in a play like Beyond the Horizon, I don't think I would agree, but interestingly enough, in something like The First Man, I
Mhm.
think he is definitely calling it out.
Yeah.
So I think that will be interesting to hear how people respond to the production tonight.
Yes.
They
Yes.
see that as well.
Absolutely. And I can't wait for you all to see that production, because it's just it's so brilliant. Eric has done such an incredible job with it. But you're right. Like, I think there is this moment in that play of calling, you know, how dare a woman change her mind, you know, and he's absolutely calling attention to that. But I do think he is really dismissive of what he saw as trends in advice and marital guidance of the day.
One
Mhm.
more thing came to mind. I think it's interesting that Arthur and Barbara Gallup, who wrote the first biography of O'Neill and then were leapfrogged by Lou Schaefer, and then spent the rest of their career to literally the day they died, coming up with a follow-up book. I think they would tell you that they really floundered for a long time to find a focus for what that new book would look like.
Yeah.
And it ended up being called By Women Possessed. So they got it.
Yeah, exactly. Sheila, is he Sheila? Yes.
Yeah, unless there's somebody else, I just could add about the discussion about Beyond the Horizon. I find Ruth difficult to, I'm just gonna say it very simplistically, like. I find her hard to like. But I did, this was another interview, Kieran O'Reilly, and I spent a long time interviewing him because he had directed a beautiful production of it, the Irish Rep in New York. And he did do this, he balanced the three of them, and the three of them mourning and grieving at the choices they made at the end. And I think it's my own biases against women, you know, that I have so much more pity for the guys than the women. I mean, women are always working with other women. Well, not always, but some women work with other women to try and get them not to be so competitive and angry at women all the time. That there's an equality. He really believed and tried to create an equality, which I think he did in that production. And I think I bring sometimes my own contempt, you know, that's, you know, it's ingrained in me too, you know. Like we women call it male identified. You may have heard that term before.
And with Beyond the Horizon, there was, you know, O'Neill's original draft, which had a much more robust character of Ruth, was severely edited down for production. So we have O'Neill's original, you know, original creation of Ruth, and it's different than what was produced and published. I also highly recommend Eric and Eric's production of Beyond the Horizon, which you can watch online from the Eugene O'Neill Foundation. That was really a driving force for him in that production, is to elevate Ruth and to see her on the same level as the two brothers. So yeah, and I also say that theater historian Dorothy Chansky, she has in her book, which is called Kitchen Sink Realisms, she does a wonderful chapter about Ruth and how the work that Ruth would have been required to do on that farm and in that hot kitchen is just crazy, and the cooking and the taking care of the child and all the things that we might not think about when we read or encounter that play. Dorothy Chansky really drills down, and it's fascinating to read. And I think those contexts are so important as we approach the women.
Any other questions or comments? A wonderful, lively discussion.
Thank you so much for letting me join this way, Dirk and Joel, if you're there.
Thanks for saying yes.
Yes.
This is great. It's perfect.
Feel better.
Yeah.
Thank you
Yeah.
all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your time. Bye. Thank you.